Do you hate to practice? Would you like to practice less? Have you ever frozen on stage? Tune in for our next episode of Music Un-tuxed. Our guest has been deemed dangerous by certain music teachers. Hello, everybody, and welcome to Music Un-tuxed. And today we have Jennifer Roig-Francoli, and she is an award-winning violinist, certified Alexander Technique teacher, and creator of the Art of Freedom method for conscious living and masterful artistry. Thank you so much, Jennifer, for being here on today's show.
Thank you, Michael. I'm really looking forward to our conversation.
I'm very excited to hear about the Art of Freedom method. When did the Art of Freedom come about? Why did it come about? And what happened before that? In
Huge
5 minutes or
questions.
less. No,
I know this is like my life story, right?
I did. Because I think it's fascinating when you mention about nerves and anxieties. This happens to so many people in classical music, realms of high stress, high achieving, artistic environments that has been kind of warped, and people become erect to create things that actually should be beautiful and releasing for them. I want to hear your story.
Let me just start by saying that the whole first part of the book is about the challenges that musicians face. People usually come to me because they're experiencing performance anxiety or life anxiety, physical pain like tendonitis or back pain, neck pain, or they just want to improve their musical and technical skills. So those are the main reasons people come to me. And I wrote the book to help explain what's going on and help everyone recognize that actually what's going on is that we're interfering with the natural organism. We are made for things to flow, for energy to flow, for love and beauty to be expressed in our lives, whether it's through our actions, our movements, our music, our words. It's like our communication, relationships, community, it's all about how we connect with other people. And things start to go wrong when we interfere with how we're connecting with other people. And when we go
Mm.
into kind of a fear-based mentality, a judger mode, as opposed to accessing, the connectedness, how we're all together one, and love is really universal. When we forget that, we start interfering and we go into compressing, and we increase the tension levels, and then things start going wrong in all kinds of ways. And you asked me about my background as a violinist.
Yes.
I actually feel like so fortunate in how I was brought into music. Both my parents are musicians, and they made it really easy for me to play the violin. Yeah, so I grew up in that musical environment. I wanted a violin when I was 2, I'm told, and they found the Suzuki method when I was 4. So I grew up in that environment, which I think has a lot to do with how things have unfolded in my life. I mean, people who don't know much about the origins of the Suzuki method might be curious to know that his philosophy is about being nurtured by love.
Mm.
And it really
Yes.
is about life, not just music. When I was 10, my mother took me to Japan to study with him every day for a month. And it was all about community because you didn't have a private lesson. We'd be working, having a private lesson, but there were bleachers on the other side of the big studio. And there were other families, parents, other violin students, all there watching me having my private lesson with Dr. Suzuki. And this was just normal. People were encouraged to come and watch lessons and observe and learn from other people. And then there would always be a group. Actually, I don't remember that in Japan, but I remember growing up in Pittsburgh, we had a very thriving Suzuki group community. Every Saturday, we'd
Mm-hmm.
have group lessons with other kids, and it was just a really fun thing. So I never had any performance anxiety growing up.
Right.
think I was single-mindedly focused on, I want to become a famous violinist and like Nathan Milstein or Heifetz, and I'm just going to do that. And so I didn't have any doubts, and I was encouraged, and I just did all that until 19. Then I took my life into a completely different direction. But until then, I was actually doing that. I studied with Milstein for 5 years. I won international competitions. I performed with like the Pittsburgh Symphony Orchestra, the Berlin Symphony Orchestra. I was really having a successful, solo career up until the age of 19 when I changed direction. I got much more interested in life itself
Mm-hmm.
and a spiritual way of looking at life. And that kind of like my single-minded focus then shifted to that. And I kept playing the violin, but not with solo ambitions. And down the road, the way I sort of dropped all of that ended up contributing to performance anxiety and pain down the road. It's kind
Okay.
of, there's a long progression of how I kind of stifled my creativity when I shifted gears. I got married at 20. I had my kids 8 years, 8 and 10 years later.
Mm-hmm.
Had a family. All I cared about was family, relationships, my spiritual life. And I didn't really care so much about music. I felt like I didn't need it anymore.
Uh-huh.
But I didn't realize how much my creative spirit was being stifled. And that caused a lot of pain, physical pain, emotional pain. That's the dirt that you were asking about, earlier in the
You're
podcast.
right. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I mean, we
And so
we all
I
have
I
it.
did yeah, so I was going down progressively without really understanding at all what was going on until I wouldn't say I hit rock bottom because, that probably would have been a lot worse, but it felt like a rock bottom
Right.
when I needed some kind of help. And I found the Alexander technique, and it very quickly completely changed my life. My neck pain went away within a couple lessons, which is really dramatic. It doesn't always happen that fast. I started being able to move more freely, and I was so much more happy. I started falling in love with life again, and
Mm-hmm.
everything opened up so fast that it was this incredible transformation that then I wanted to understand because I didn't know what was happening to me. And that's why fast forward a couple decades, this was in 2003 when all that started. Fast forward to now I do this for other musicians, but I do it in a very different way. I do teach the Alexander technique, but I teach a special form of it, which does not require touch. It's called Primal Alexander. Primal Alexander was created by Mio Morales. And so I've kind of done additional training in Primal Alexander, which is like a whole different world of Alexander technique. I
Mm-hmm.
just want to say that because anyone listening who wants to go, discover Alexander technique, that's great. But what I'm talking about now and what I teach is it actually goes beyond it in many ways. Alexander technique is wonderful. It's very valuable and it changed my life. But I always felt a bit in the dark about what was actually happening. And I wanted to understand how I could do it for myself.
Mm-hmm.
And I was not getting that. Even after 3 years, 1,600 hours of teacher training, I still didn't really understand how to get that amazing transformation for myself. And until, finally I met Mio and all the pieces came together. And now I'm like, oh, that's what I want. I want to be able to do this, and I want to teach my students to be able to think for themselves and help themselves. So that's why I teach Primal Alexander.
When I talk about your instrument, is your instrument you or the violin at this point,
Yes.
or both?
My primary instrument is me, and that's what I teach my students.
Yeah.
There's nothing more important than getting to know ourselves. You are more important than what you're doing. You are more important. What's happening to you, what you're experiencing right now in this moment is way more important than the music you're going to play. It's way more important than how quickly you rosin the bow or how you put the shoulder rest on your instrument. The problem is we get distracted and our attention is scattered all over the place. It's on our fingers, on our bowing, it's on the audience member, it's on the conductor, it's on the sheet music. And it's all about trying to get something and do something.
Mm-hmm.
And we forget that actually the way to let all those things happen easily is to put yourself first. You are your primary instrument, and you need to pay attention to what's happening inside and find ease inside. And when you find ease on the inside, and that's the just natural state of energetic flow and ease that's in us, when you are in touch with that and you prioritize that over what you're doing out here with your fingers and, you know, out in the world, everything you do gets easier because that's the natural order of priorities. It's our human design. It's the way the world works. You have to start with you. And then the secondary instrument is my violin. But
Right.
what's amazing, what I've discovered over many years of doing this is that even when I don't practice the violin, and I have to say, I haven't practiced my violin for months now. I did the Four Seasons, I think it was almost 2 years ago with an
Mm-hmm.
orchestra in Pittsburgh, a soloist, because I have come full circle, by the way, performing again as solo in a very different way. But since then, I really have hardly touched my violin. But what happens is when you're improving how you coordinate your thinking with your movements, with your emotions, with your creative spark, with your creative spirit, when it's all integrated and aligned, and you're prioritizing that moment by moment through the day, every day, basically, I call that primary practice. Your
Primary
primary
practice.
practice is that coordinating and integrating yourself. When you're prioritizing that, then anything else you do improves. So when I get out my violin, I'm after not playing or practicing for months, I'm always just flabbergasted at how much easier certain things are.
Yeah, I want
Because we have this belief that we have to practice for hours every day and we have to keep practicing every day and practice with your instrument. And we forget that this self is the instrument we really need to be practicing because then everything else gets easier. I'd
Mhm.
say maybe 80-20, 80 this, 20 what's going on out there, or it's probably more like 100%. But
Wow. So the idea of picking up your instrument and doing those arduous scales in the morning and just doing the grind and when you hear things like no pain, no gain, this is not successful practice technique. And the amount that you practice and what you practice is not going to help you achieve the freedom of what you're really looking for.
Part 3 of the book goes into the specifics of how to practice some of the basic primal Alexander tools. We call them awareness etudes. And it also covers a lot of the myths that, well, specifically 4 myths that people have about practicing and about improving. And one of them is the quantitative idea of practice.
That's
Yes, of
what, yes.
course, you know, if you practice more well, yes, you'll improve faster. But most people forget the well part.
Right.
And they just focus on the quantity and the repetition. And honestly, that's so much not as important as people think.
Mm-hmm.
And what's so much more important that people miss is that you have to know how to practice in a way that you want to perform. If you want to perform with ease, you want to enjoy yourself on stage, then you have to actually practice doing that. You have to practice with joy. You have to practice with ease because your brain wires in accordance to what you're repeating. And if you are repeating the grind, I mean, the
Mm-hmm.
grind implies effort and hardness and tension and
Yes.
pushing. There's a pushing quality that there's increased tension built into that concept. So if you're practicing by pushing, by forcing, by obligation, like feeling like, well, I have to do this every day. So I'm just going to do it. And I don't care if I'm tired or I don't feel well, or I just had an argument with my spouse. And it's like, without taking any of the rest of your life into consideration, if you just push through with all that tension, you're just going to get really good at playing your instrument with a lot of tension and
That's right.
discomfort and not so much joy and happiness. So it's really, really important. I put everything that I do into this big context that I call the art of freedom method for conscious living and masterful artistry because, well, just there are 5 life pillars. The first one is purpose. You have to
Right.
know why you're doing what you're doing. It's like,
Mhm.
and go deeper. It's not just because I said I would practice every day and I stick to my commitments. There's a lot to be said with sticking to commitments and practicing every day. I'm not saying we don't need to practice, but why are we doing it? Well, ultimately, it's because we love music and we want to share our love of music with everyone else. And we want to enjoy it. We want to love doing it. We want to have a good time. We want to be at ease and feel free and expressive and express our true selves and all that. Well, you got to practice that.
Yeah.
You have to practice it with the instrument. And even more importantly, throughout the day, every day with the primary instrument, the whole self.
Mhm. So purpose is number one. Yeah.
Definitely. Got to start with a why. Why am I doing this? Why am I a musician
Yeah.
anyway? This is hard, and most people are not in it for the millions of dollars they're going to make. So you better understand, why am I doing this?
Right.
And then the other life pillars, we have purpose, then we have mind, body, spirit, and artistry.
Right.
And actually, the artistry is last. Like the scales, the technique, all those things are important if you want to, make great art. Obviously, we need to have craft, but truly, we need so much less of that than we think.
It seems like artistry is almost the outcome that, but if you have your mind, body, spirit, and purpose, well, okay, then the artistry will happen.
Yes,
It seems.
and it's at the same time because when you're integrating
Right.
purpose with mind, body, and spirit, that in itself is an art. It's like
Mhm.
the art of living. Yeah.
Yeah.
And when you are bringing ease and grace and love and joy into your everyday life, then you're naturally going to bring it to your musical instrument and it's going to come through. And that's what we want. We want to be moved and we want to move our audiences so they can experience that too. But if
Mhm.
we're blocking it physically, emotionally, mentally, spiritually, it's just not going to come through and it's going to be less than satisfying for
Yeah.
everybody, for the performer and the audience.
Right.
That's
It's
the
a
goal.
much more authentic communication with your audience to have all of those aligned. Yeah, I love
Yes.
that. I feel like I myself have been through this. And I think when I was just hearing your story, it's giving me a little bit of PTSD from my
Oh,
past.
sorry.
But no, that's all right. But I'm thinking back to certain times. Wow, because I remember when in an orchestra concert in Lincoln Center, slow movement of a Chopin piano concerto when the conductor is telling you to use this much bow, and you're just locked there. And
Yeah.
the Tully Hall's filled, and the New York Times is reviewing the concert, and you're at this high
Mhm.
class school and you're frozen. And then all of a sudden,
Yeah.
something kicks in, and your mind starts going crazy. And that's kind of what
Yeah.
happened to me. And I hear this story. I know I wasn't alone, but I thought I was for so
No.
many years. And
Yeah.
to realize that there's a place to go through, but at the moment you feel so helpless and
Yes. Yeah. And you
almost
are
like
absolutely right. It's so common.
mhm,
Sorry.
we
Go ahead.
it's paralyzing. It can be a paralyzing experience because nothing is working except this brain and this voice inside of you, and it just stops everything. And that's what I really feel that this book would have saved a lot of years of frustration. And when you say practice with the idea of freedom and ease, well, there was a point where I personally was practicing defensively with the idea,
Mm.
oh, I know this is going to happen when I get nervous for a concert. So I'm going to, bow this way, or I'm going to do this kind of fingering, defensive fingerings, which just seem so counterintuitive to what true music making should be, which is
Mhm.
just like you said, a free flow from mind, body, and spirit.
And I had a similar experience when I got a job with the Rochester Philharmonic Orchestra in Rochester, New York, and I was playing with them for a while. That was actually the first time I experienced real performance anxiety.
Mm,
It was in exactly the same kind of situation you're talking about. The job position that was open that I won was in the back of the second violin section. And I had never had any nerves as a soloist. I
hmm.
was just excited. Sure, I would
Right.
get excited,
Yes.
I'd have the adrenaline, but I was looking forward to it. I really enjoyed my solo performances. I was kind of brought up that way and just was easy for me.
Hmm.
Then when I was in the back of the seconds and I had been trained like most or all violinists, if you're in the orchestra and you can hear yourself, you're too loud. That's what I
Yeah.
was told. And so when I was playing those soft sections, like you just told us about your experience, the same thing happened to me. And I also had an essential tremor diagnosed around the same time.
Mm,
And so it was never, ever an issue. I probably had it my whole life. I had never had this going on, the shaking in my hand until then, when I was supposed to play slowly and softly, my bow would start shaking. And
yeah.
then, of course, the fear, who can tell? Can my colleagues, can my stand partners tell? Can they hear me? And there were times when I would literally air bow to not touch the string because I was afraid of it bouncing. So I
Mm,
wasn't even playing. I mean,
wow.
what a
Yeah.
way to play. Not play. It was horrible. I
I
just
know.
yeah, but the worse it got, and you said it. It's like when that happens, the thoughts start spiraling out of control.
Hmm.
And then it's damage control. You play defensively, you come up with workarounds. And it's like when people have pain, physical pain, and they're, well, this happened to me too at a different time in college where I had shooting pain up my pinky on the left hand. So I couldn't
Mm,
actually, I literally couldn't play on my fourth finger. It went away quickly. I was lucky, but I've always had that susceptibility throughout my life. So, of course, I would change fingerings. I wouldn't use the fourth finger.
right.
I would, right? So you kind of
Yeah.
have these workarounds.
You do.
And it's not a way to be free and expressive when you're afraid of what might happen.
Hmm.
So
Yes. Yeah.
there's
The fear,
a lot there.
fear is not a way to live. It's not a way to make
Fear and
music.
self-doubt. What it comes down to is each person, each individual, we need to bring our attention back to ourselves
Hmm.
and get curious. Like, what's
Yeah.
actually happening to me when I'm thinking this way, when I'm moving this way? How am I reacting to the people and the events around me?
Hmm.
And if we can just keep, like, change the direction of our attention
Right.
towards ourselves and get curious. Okay, how can I find more ease and peace and goodness in myself? And it's like, if I can create that for myself, and then I can let that come out and share it with other people, and then they can do that. It's like what we're doing right here, I
Right.
think. Really, really important work. And you know, there's nothing new under the sun either. These are
Mhm.
age-old ideas. This is how the mind, the body, the spirit, they were designed to work this way. And people, there have been sages across millennia who say these things, and some people listen and most people don't.
I have a question for you. As our society gets faster, gets more
Mm-hmm.
technical, and you're preaching this and you're practicing it, you have an
Mm-hmm.
online
Yes.
business. There's a lot of stimulation from screen time. It's,
Mm-hmm.
so tech oriented and almost out of body.
Mm-hmm.
How do you rejuvenate? Because a lot of community work with people that are in the trenches doing work, which you are in a different respect, because a lot of it's online. What are some of the vehicles you use?
Well, this is a great question. Yeah, thank you for asking. And I think the best way to answer that question is to do it right now. It's like right now for you here, for me, for anybody listening, you know, we're engaged in some kind of a technological miracle, right? So, however, you are the most important thing in your life right now.
Mm-hmm.
I am, okay, what just happened? people listening aren't going to be able to see what just happened. But Michael, what just happened to you? Because you made a huge shift.
I know. You did it. Yeah. I sat back and I let things kind of flow downward from me.
And you didn't do that because you thought, oh, I should sit back and let things flow downward, I suspect.
Hmm.
I think it was probably because I suggested that you are the most important thing. And
Yes, here I am.
yeah, your attention, yes, your
This screen
attention.
is not the most important thing. I am.
That's right. That's right. You are more important than I am to you. I
Mhm.
am more important to me than anybody else. I have to be. I'm the only person with me 24/7.
Hmm.
Nobody's going to listen to me when this is over, right? Like we're going to shut this off and people are going to
Right.
be back with their own lives. But everybody
Yes.
listening, you are the most important thing in your universe every moment of your life. So it makes sense to have the majority of your attention in a specific way. This is not about becoming self-centered in the way that we usually think of that. This
Right.
is about centering yourself. This is about recognizing that you are central to your experience and let it be that way. That's how we're designed. And then when you add in curiosity, like a childlike curiosity, and you ask what Mio calls the primary concern, if you ask, what's happening to me right now? What am I noticing about myself? When you can make that more important in the present moment than everything else out there, then your
Mm.
priorities are aligned the way we're designed for them to align. And see what happened to you was that when you brought your attention back to yourself, you came away from the screen just for a moment and your posture improved. You
Hmm.
weren't trying to fix your posture,
No, I
right?
wasn't.
No, no. It was because you were thinking differently and your thoughts are reflected by your body.
Hmm.
We don't have to fix our posture. A lot of people think Alexander technique is about posture. It's really not. I mean, it is for some people. And sometimes I talk about it because it's what some people are interested in. So I start there. But ultimately, it's about being
Hmm.
yourself, knowing how you react to things and learning how to get back to that. You said, how do you get back to a youthfulness? How do you, for me, this is the fountain of youth, right? Where you can, with your mind, get curious like a child.
Hmm.
Be ye as little children. I think it says somewhere in the Bible or something. I don't know my Bible. That's not my area of
I
expertise at
don't
all.
either.
But
Yeah.
I know these quotes from different religions, and that's a really good one. Be ye as little children. Little children are open, they are receptive, they're curious, and they are fully embodying who they are without even trying. They're
Hmm.
present, they're in the moment. And if we can use our minds creatively to spark that kind of lively curiosity. Also, children are okay with not knowing because they're not supposed to know. Adults, we're not okay with not knowing. We're supposed to know and we're supposed to be able to figure things out and we're supposed to get things right. As soon as you think that way, you're thinking like an adult. And we
Hmm.
need to go into this childlike, I don't really know. And I wonder, huh, if
It's
I
a,
try this, what happens? Yeah, go ahead.
what the concept of embarrassment is a big stress maker, I believe.
Yes,
And
absolutely.
if I don't know something, sometimes I'll lie and say, "Oh, yeah, sure, yeah, whatever."
Right.
Saving face.
Yes. Yes.
No, what's the
Yes.
point though? Yeah.
Oh, I can totally relate to that. I spent a lot of time, as my particular story on this is that when I went to Indiana University, I was studying with Joseph Gingold for modern violin, but at the same time, I got interested in the early music movement and I
Mm.
started learning Baroque violin. Well, I knew nothing, nothing, nothing about original instruments. I'd never even heard of them. I didn't even know there was such a thing until someone stuck a Baroque violin in my hands and said, okay, play this. We play at A415 and we stand up when we use gut strings and total ignorance. And then I went into doing that more than my modern violin for a long time. And I played with Apollo's Fire. And
Oh.
all along, I was feeling like I should know about the historical treatises. I should know about different temperaments and tunings because everybody else in the early music world seemed to know those things. So I did a lot of work on myself to be okay with not knowing and not having to put up a pretense. There were times where I would just sort of fake it, like you said, kind of little white lies, like, oh, yes, I know about that temperament or
Yeah,
whatever.
right.
I don't think I would actually come out and lie, but I would make it somehow understood that I knew what they were talking about.
Yes.
Yeah.
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 And
So we just have to be
basically,
like little children. I think that's where the solution really starts with going back to your purpose. That first of my 5 life pillars. When we feel confused or embarrassed in any difficult situation, and when we're feeling uncomfortable, it's usually because our priorities are suddenly out of whack
mm,
and we have forgotten what's truly important. So this is where I finally got to, with lots of work on myself, is that, really I love music because I love love. And this is a
mm,
really great medium for me to be able to communicate that. And that, you know what? I know that. And I know that. And
yeah,
I know that without knowing how I know that, but something deep inside of me and visceral. It's like I have the faith that I know. I,
right.
I know that, if nothing else. And you know what? That's good enough.
Yeah,
That's good enough for me. And if it's not good enough for anybody else, then it's their problem. And I'm just going to keep being myself in
that's
that
right.
way. And that solves a lot of problems. And it's
Yeah,
easy because we're made that way. Actually, I
right.
shouldn't say it's easy. It's not always easy to get there. It is and it isn't. To be completely honest, with the specific tools that I teach that come from Primal Alexander specifically, it is instantly easy to
Mm,
access that in a split second. And Alexander himself said, you can change the habits of a lifetime in an instant. And then he added, if you use your brains. It's like you actually have to, understand a little bit and want it and use your thinking in a constructive way.
rather
And
than
it's really, really,
destructive.
really easy.
Yeah.
Yeah. I teach my students how to do this on day one, and everybody can do it. It's
Mhm.
easy. It's
Yeah.
natural. We just have to
Right.
know how to do it and then do it again and again
Yeah.
and again.
I saw your workshop at the ASTA conference in Louisville. I was immediately struck by your sincerity and generosity.
Thank you. That was a
Yeah.
great experience. It was a really special experience for me, actually, to attend those conferences. We're talking about, if there are any listeners, it's like who don't know, it's you're talking about the American String Teachers Association and the Suzuki Association of the Americas. And I had the good fortune to give 2 workshops there and meet people like you. And I think that the thing that struck me the most about being there was being, first of all, being in person live with 3,000 music teachers. That was tremendous for me. I do all of my coaching these days online, and I love being online, but I'm not so used to being around, living, breathing musicians anymore. And it was so heartwarming. It was at the same time overwhelming and also really, really inspiring and heartwarming to be around so many people who care passionately, deeply about music, and not just about music, but about sharing their love and passion of music with their students and their communities. I thought that was just really beautiful. And I learned a lot from being there.
There were a lot of people when you were giving workshops about the art of freedom and
Yes.
kind of overcoming anxieties and or going through
Mhm.
anxieties. I can't help but think that you had to put your own practice into what you were doing, and you probably do it all the time.
Yes.
But that I can imagine that would be a nerve wracking experience. But let's hear how you cope.
Yeah. It really, really was a major stretch for me personally and professionally. What happened is I had never been a member of these associations until last spring. So a year before the actual conferences I joined, and I applied to have my workshops accepted miraculously, both of them were accepted. And so I had the two workshops, but then I decided to go ahead and have an exhibit booth to showcase my book, Make Great Music with Ease, The Secret to Smarter Practice, Confident Performance, and Living a Happier Life. And so the booth was all about that, but I had never even been to a conference like this. I had never had a booth. I had no idea what to expect. And I wasn't used to being around live people much. So it was really overwhelming, like I said. And it did stretch me it did make me have to rise to the occasion. And this is really what I teach my musicians. And this is what the Alexander technique is about. Alexander himself, without going into his story, he was an actor who had performance issues and overcame them. And he said, quote, "Mine is a method for the control of human reaction." And so I was reacting to having all these people there, 3,000 people. I was reacting to not having had the time to prepare my workshops, either of them, except months in advance. I was required to send in a summary of what I was going to teach, which I really don't like to do because I prefer to do things closer to the time. It's just how my creativity works. I don't like to think 3 months in advance because I'm a different person 3 months later. But so I had these outlines from 3 months or 5 months earlier, but I had no time to prepare the workshops. I was spending all my time leading up to the conference figuring out how to have an exhibit booth, what I needed, ordering like a banner, hiring designers, just all kinds of stuff that was new to me. And I was up to here with needing to practice what I preach, is controlling my own reaction to a completely unfamiliar situation. And as musicians, as performers, we need to be able to rise to the occasion and show up, and the show goes on no matter how you're feeling, no matter whether you had time to prepare or not, no matter whether you've forgotten your dress clothes or who the scary person is sitting in the front row and the critics over there. We need to be ready for anything.
I'm getting chills as you tell me.
That's what I had to do.
I kind of love that.
Yeah, it was really exciting. I broke down a little bit the night before everything started because I'm like, I can't do this by myself. I thought I would have help for the booth, and then it didn't work out that way. So I was really doing it all on my own. But just to finish it out, I learned so much. It was the best experience. And I think the most important thing that I learned is to really, really trust that I know my stuff. And I kept thinking, okay, tomorrow I will plan my workshops. No, the next day, I'll plan them on the drive down from Cincinnati to Louisville. And then I didn't. And the night before, I'll plan it for tomorrow morning. Oh no, I have time tomorrow morning to plan it. In the end, I was literally on the escalator trying to find my room for those workshops, looking at the outline I had made months in advance and thinking to myself, okay, what did I tell them I would teach today? And I showed up and I practiced my Art of Freedom method and Primal Alexander technique, which is touch-free Alexander technique, by the way. And I just showed up, let go, and let whatever needed to come through, come through. And I have to say that I think those two workshops were really probably some of the best workshops I've ever given.
They were
so
great.
Humbling. So it was a pretty amazing experience all around. As a performer, when you're able to really be present and let go and let things flow through you and be moved yourself by the music or the ideas, when you're moved and you're allowing that to happen, then the audience can be with you and they can be moved too.
Allowing things to flow through you. And the mindfulness that's involved in that, and the breathing and the awareness. And you speak a lot of that, I know, in the workshop, and also your book. And I do want to mention your book, and I do have it.
Make Great Music with Ease.
Make Great Music with Ease.
The secret to smarter practice.
Yeah, we all want to make great music with ease. Well, thank you so much for sharing. What a great conversation.
Likewise. Thank you so much.